On November 16, 1938, Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, often referred to as the father of LSD, changed the world with his accidental synthesis of LSD-25.
This mysterious compound would be left virtually untouched for the next 5 years, until Hofmann revisited it and became the first person to ever experience the hallucinogenic effects of lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD. 20 years later, the chemical compound found its home within the counterculture movement of the 1960s, with the likes of Timothy Leary and Dr. Richard Alpert, two major figures of the counterculture who led controversial psilocybin and LSD experiments at Harvard University. Leary's famous quote, "turn on, tune in, drop out," and controversial views led former President Richard Nixon to dub him the most dangerous man in America. Unfortunately, it was this association with the counterculture movement that led to the passing of the Controlled Substances Act of 1971. The act put a stop to the extensive scientific research and literature emerging on psychedelics at the time, with the federal criminalization of these drugs shutting down all operations.
There has been a resurgence, I think, of interest in psychedelic drugs, which for a while were sort of considered like not an area that researchers legitimately ought to go after. And I think as we've learned more about how the brain works, we've begun to realize that these are potential tools for research purposes and might be clinically beneficial.
The Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic Research has been at the forefront of this resurgence, publishing breakthrough studies on various psychoactive substances, including a study on MDMA and its effectiveness when treating patients struggling with PTSD, as well as studies on the effects of psilocybin, the chemical compound found in magic mushrooms, in assisting long-term smokers trying to quit. They most recently published a study looking into the effect of 2 large-dose psilocybin therapy sessions on patients suffering from major depressive disorder. In this small-scale study, they found that 71% of the participants showed a clinically significant response 4 weeks after the sessions.
It seems to be so powerful that it often feels like it's too good to be true, but yet when you look at more and more studies, they seem to be consistent.
Psychedelic therapy could prove to be revolutionary in helping people whose conditions aren't alleviated by currently used methods.
So antidepressants, and I would say a standard current approaches in psychiatry, so those are antidepressants, but also counseling, variety of different types of psychotherapy, but none of them are actually effective for particular psychological or psychiatric conditions.
There are studies underway to see if psilocybin is effective as well with addictions, obsessive compulsive disorder, and depression. And there are reasons for that, not just because it works with this other distress, but because what we understand now what happens in the brain.
We know now at the most basic level, if you're talking about the serotonergic psychedelics, the ones like LSD, psilocybin, DMT, 2CB, etc., those seem to bind to the serotonin 2A receptor. That seems to be at least what, if you block that effect, that will take away most of the psychedelic experience.
Psychedelics are also known to have fewer negative side effects compared to most common antidepressants.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sexual side effects, there's no weight gain.
These substances appear to be way safer than anything else we have. If I were to compare, say, just basic antidepressant to something like, let's take psilocybin or MDMA, the safety profiles, shockingly, to those hallucinogenics are actually better, even at the high doses, as long as the patients are guarded and guided, as long as medicine's administered in a safe environment.
As far as depression goes, I think that might be, I feel like that could be the disorder that these drugs will be best suited for. Even the people that are addicted to certain drugs, one of the reasons they're addicted to drugs is because they're depressed, right? And so I think even if it doesn't treat the addiction, it might treat the depression that then fuels some of the drug use.
However, most psychedelics such as psilocybin and LSD are Schedule I controlled substances, which prevents patients from accessing potentially life-saving treatments.
When basically government on the top level tells you, no, there is no medical application here, and there's a high risk for addiction and side effects, which, by the way, out of all those 3, none are true. Literally, none. There's tons of evidence for all the substances we're talking about. There's tons of evidence that they're safe. And so, to me, it's not just ridiculous. It's almost I wouldn't be afraid of saying criminal.
Researchers at Johns Hopkins suggest that, quote, psilocybin should be recategorized from a Schedule I drug, one with no known medical potential, to a Schedule IV drug, such as prescription sleep aids, but with tighter control.
There has to be some regulation, but there's just no reason to keep it in Schedule I, simply because the research is so restricted.
Advocates for psychedelics are also pushing for decriminalization, which would remove criminal penalties for possession of these drugs for personal use. We've already seen this take place in Oregon, where 2020 ballot measure 109 made it the first state to both decriminalize psilocybin and legalize it for therapeutic use. Denver, Oakland, California, and Washington, D.C. have all passed similar laws.
I'm expecting that we're going to see a lot more states very quickly picking it up. You know, if what took cannabis decades will probably take psilocybin just years.
It's clear that psychedelics aren't simply recreational drugs people abuse and get addicted to. The science proves that they will play a crucial role in how we treat various mental health conditions going forward. By keeping these medicines as Schedule I controlled substances, the federal government neglects all of the Americans with conditions where psychedelics may be their only hope.